another story chat with Sergio. And I'm Sergio. And welcome. Happy Monday. I hope you had a great day. And maybe some of you guys are still working, being productive, which is kind of what I want to talk about today, is talking about productivity. So that should be pretty cool. So let's get into that, and we'll talk about a couple of things that are on my mind. This comes to mind because of the fact that there's like this virus lockdown, and you're at home. You might have a bunch of distractions, and that is kind of a recipe for disaster when you're trying to get work done, right? Because you turn on the TV, you're at home, or there's other people around, and you get distracted by things. But one of the things that helps me at least is getting organized for one. I think I mentioned that before, but also to kind of live by the calendar. This is kind of a habit that I picked up when I was working at the studios because uh, when you're in a production, everything is very scheduled. It's very regimented, right? You have tasks to do, you get assignments, and all of that gets handed down. You have to be really on top of it, and then everything is managed with a calendar. And I'm used to using the Google Calendar, the G Calendar, and hopefully many of you guys are familiar with like G Suite and all of those apps and tools. I love that stuff. I run my businesses by it. I have a lot of things, productions and everything is all on that with the task management tool, and then also doing the G Calendar because you can share it and you can have all these, invite people to your meetings and that kind of stuff. So what I do when I'm doing my personal stuff, I'll use that calendar and I'll block in hours of time for things that I need to be taken care of. So it's personal stuff. I'll write that in. Okay, I get like an hour to fool around doing personal things, screw around on the web, whatever I want to do. But then in, like, let's say the afternoon block after lunch, I can sit down and actually do production work and make headway on some of the things I've been doing. What was I doing today, for example? I sat down a little bit and did some drawings and some sketches and thinking about this film that I'm working on and understanding what kind of problems I need to be solving for the story and the characters. Did some research, and then I actually sat down and drew something. And this was in my just on my drafting table. And I'll share some of these things with you guys eventually. But it's the idea that you're sitting down with an intention and trying to get as much as possible done within that time. So you don't really screw around. You're not having your mind wander on other things. So what helps there is one that you block out as much noise as possible, and I'm not just talking about like sound. I'm talking about just distractions and the phone and like your email popping up every 5 minutes. Like getting rid of those things really helps. So one of the things when I sit at my drafting table, there's no computer there, so I can actually just draw and doodle and create sketches, warm up, and that's something to kind of get the ideas flowing. So let me know if you guys have any questions in regards to that kind of productivity stuff, because to me that's a really big factor. You can spend a lot of, or you can, let's say, you can waste a lot of time when it comes to working on your productions, and a week goes by and you really feel like you haven't gotten anything done. So the flip side to that is another couple tips so you don't like kick yourself in the pants every time that happens to you, is that if you organize the tasks that you need to be doing that day, right? In terms of storytelling, if you're going to be working on a really challenging sequence, you lay everything out and you try and make some progress. And if you get that done first and you get that out of the way, even if you get kind of interrupted by phone calls or meetings or people taking away your time, maybe you have to, if you're at home, you gotta tend to housework, or there's a bunch of dishes piling up, or you're hungry, you got to make some food. Right, when you're in production, sometimes you can like have all that taken care of if you go out and you grab a bite. Maybe you make your lunch in the morning or something, but that kind of factor is taken away when you're at home. uh, you have to plan all these things and it becomes a little bit more difficult. So it's still solvable. It's not a problem that you can't overcome. It's just you have to understand that that is going to be an issue that's going to bring you down. So you got to make sure you attack it proactively and not let it consume you, right? So if you get that one most important thing done in the day, it'll make you feel like $1,000,000. It makes you feel like, yes, I've accomplished something. And then the next day you do it again. You set out like a list of tasks, and I do this with, like I say, my Google tools, and I'll use the Google Tasks, that kind of app, on my phone and also in my email. There's also Google Keep, which some people use. And there's all kinds. Like I use Asana. I've used what's the there's one from Confluence. I forgot what it was, but those are like production tools. Like when you're in the studio, they'll have different tools. Me personally, I like to use Asana, which is task management. My Google Tasks, which is just very simple, and I can like type in something, put a link. It's always there on my phone. Even things if like I have to buy something on Amazon, I can put it in there real quick, and it's just there to like get it out of my mind and put it away so I can think about more important things, right? And then, when it comes to actual production work, I'll use Asana because I'll make a task for the things that I have to be doing. And, so if you guys don't know what that is, it's just a task management tool where you can create events that you need to be worried about, and you can organize those by date or also by category. And that syncs with your calendar, right? So maybe it sounds a little complicated for you artist guys who don't want to deal with all this tech. Um, it might seem a little overwhelming, but it's really not. It's very simple. I mean, I'm sure you guys have a calendar app or something on your phone already. So if you click on that, at least sometimes you got a dentist appointment. Sometimes you gotta I don't know, make some kind of errand, and you set that in your calendar, right? Or somebody's birthday, you put that in there. So it's no different if you actually have somebody, you have to actually go do something, or you're at home and you actually have to solve a production problem and create and do something creative that way. Well, cool. So those are kind of some productivity tips, and let me know. I'm always just jabbering out. This is what the story chats are all about. So maybe you guys have some suggestions too, if you want to chime in and let us know what works for you. I think everybody's different, and so one of the things is you might hear me say something, you might read a book or like look on the web and get some advice from people. Try it and then see if it works for you. So if it doesn't work for you, don't feel like you're crazy, or this is like like you have to adapt to what some guru or somebody out there said that this is the way to do it. That's not necessarily the case. Figure out what's best for you, and to me the end goal is just to be productive. So if you work well at night, great. If you do better in the morning, that's great too. Just adjust accordingly, and the real key is that you're constantly creating work, and you're being productive and creating something cool with your stories. So let me give a shout out to some people who are coming out here. Wow, it's awesome. We've got a big crowd. Yeah. Wow. Very, very cool. It's good to see some of the alum from Storyboard that I recognize some of these names up here. Hey Kenny, what's up, buddy? Good to see you on here. And this is the other thing too, is that like being connected like this, it helps me at least to get inspired by other people. I'll search, kind of, in my lunch break or something, I'll start searching Instagram and look at my feed, right? And I have, artist friends that are on there. I have people that I follow. There's things that I'm into, but I don't necessarily do. I'm a real big fan of sculpture, and I love doing sculpture. I just don't do it enough. And so I have a bunch of sculptors on there that are doing like really like large format pieces, and sometimes they're doing like monsters and stuff like that. That's so inspiring. I love it. That's part of to get you the pep, because the other thing connected with productivity is staying motivated, right? And if you have a list of people that you admire, it's a good idea to figure out how they got to where they are and why you admire them. So let's say it's a really badass artist who works, at a company that you want to work for. Maybe it's a film director who's done a movie that you really like. One thing that's really cool and much more accessible nowadays is to actually go in and figure out how they were able to pull that off. And the common trait that I found in both athletes, artists, musicians, anybody working at a very, very high level, they have an ultra focus on what they want to accomplish. And that singular goal, or maybe multiple tasks, but there's a singular goal of doing a project or executing something, is so tight and ingrained in what they're doing and their actions that they do every single day that that to me it's really inspiring to see that. So let me see if I can mention some of the people that I follow. Like certainly artists. Like I always have like back on my bookshelf, right? I'm in front of my bookshelf. The ones that come to mind are the guys that are kind of let's say the grandmasters of illustration, and the people that I've studied when it comes to doing some visual storytelling and illustration. So guys like Norman Rockwell, Dean Cornwell, J.C. Leindecker, um, John Singer Sargent, who he's not necessarily an illustrator but a portrait painter, and Ilya Repin, who's a famous Russian painter. So all of the heavyweights, right? Alphonse Mucha, I love this guy. Nikolai Feshin, who's also a Russian artist. So if you guys know any of these people that I'm talking about here, um, I've read the book. I have these books, right? They're, like I said, on my bookshelf. I'll open them up and I actually sit down and read like how they got to where they are. And it's this like almost obsessive nature of that. Every day they do something and they're painting every day, right? So let me give you an example. If you guys had recently seen the Vincent Van Gogh movie, I knew his story and that kind of like his background. So obviously, I think many people will know who Vincent Van Gogh is, famous painter. But did you guys know that he died at 36 years old? I think it was something like that, in his 30s, if I'm not mistaken. It was at 36. And if you look at the body of work, right? And I'm in my 40s now. If you look at the body of work that Vincent Van Gogh produced, like I'm essentially older than that guy, and he was just a machine when it came to creating art and painting. And it was like this obsessive nature of creating art, and that's why he was able to reach such a high level. I fully believe that. And if we're going to apply this to something that we're doing in our lives, how many things are distracting you right now and not letting you reach your full potential, right? Like how many hours a day do you play video games? How many hours a day are you on your phone, right? For some people, actually, this was a reality. It's like, how many hours a day are you commuting? Like, I know people. I used to do this too. I would commute like an hour and a half each way to go to work when I was doing. Sometimes it was less, but like it took me about an hour and 20 minutes to get to Skywalker Ranch in the morning from San Francisco. And on the way back, it was a little bit less because traffic lightened up, especially like once we got out. And like that adds up after a while, man. That was years of doing that. And you think of all the time that you spent commuting. And I'm not saying that that's something you can necessarily change, because it was worth it for me working on that production. But those are just hours and hours of your life that are in a car. So can you be productive doing that? That's why podcasts are great. That's why, even recording films and playing the soundtrack as you're in your car, even like film analysis, all that, audiobooks, like you can do all of that while you're driving. And certainly if you're carpooling, that's also fun too. So I still do that sometimes when I'm out driving, and my wife and I will put in a podcast and listen to something cool. After a while, like the same playlist of music gets old, or whatever. The radio certainly isn't that exciting anymore. So these options are out and available. And what we're doing, we're filling our brain with inspiration, so that when it comes to actually making stories, that's what we're going to do, and hit it hard when you do that. I always I have these conversations sometimes with people in my circle, and I really like this story that I heard about Michael Jordan. And when now everybody knows who Michael Jordan is, right? Super famous basketball player. A lot of people think he's one of the best of all time. Now, what was cool for me to see was in this documentary where he was still playing for the Bulls in his awesome compound that he had, in this super badass house that he has in Chicago. He had a full gym that he trained with, and it was like basketball gym, and it also had like weight equipment, and like I'm sure that guy had a chef and whatever he needed to help his game. But okay, one, he reached a level where he has the means to be able to have that kind of setup, right? But apparently, him, Michael Jordan, and a couple of other Bulls players like Scottie Pippen and some other ones would go to his house in the morning. They would get up earlier before they had to go to practice, the official practice with the Bulls. And I think they would get up at like 6 a.m. and start practicing and practice before they actually went to the real practice, right? And then they would have breakfast and all that kind of stuff there. And so their whole life revolved around what they were doing. And that's why he was able to reach such a high level. I think that was one of the reasons why, other than the passion and all of the hard work that he put in there. But people think it's like, yeah, he was just born that way. And man, every single person that I have studied or know that's working at a really high level, they are also the most intense hard workers you will ever meet. And I'm not talking like they're sweating and they're like, going crazy when they're working. It's just that singular focus, that application of reaching their goals and doing what they're doing with just a laser focus, and just not getting distracted by things. So that's where this productivity thing comes in. I remember a good buddy of mine, Bosco, we shared an office at Lucasfilm, and he was telling me when he went to visit Rembrandt at the Rembrandt Museum, which is in his house in I think Amsterdam or Netherlands somewhere, and uh, and he said, one, it was tiny. Yeah, I think the guy was pretty short, and think Rembrandt. This is like 1500s, right? Mid 1400s, 1500s, if I'm getting my dates right. And you guys should know Rembrandt, right? He's just a grandmaster, a painter, artist. And he said the thing that he thought was really cool was that, back then there's no internet, there's no cell phones, and I don't think there was even electricity. So like these guys had to like work by daylight, okay? And so in his studio, this is from my buddy Bosco is telling me that like his life revolved around art. There was like a kitchen, there was like his easel and like a bed, and that's it. And this is like one of the most renowned grandmaster artists. So uh, every day he was painting and drawing and doing work. And I think he was also living large. Like he was well known when he was alive. So it's back in the day when artists were rock stars, he was one of them. And that to me is really inspiring. I've seen when I used to live in Spain working on production out there. I went to visit the Sorolla Museum. So if you guys know who Joaquin Sorolla is, he's a really amazing post-impressionist painter. And the museum that has his work was his house. And again, these are guys that just top notch in their game. And you go and you see this awesome house, but then his whole environment was designed to create artwork and to produce, and that's why probably he was able to reach such a high level. Other than the fact that these guys were rock stars back then, so they had money, they had commissions, they were probably hobnobbing with the right people. Regardless, though, they were not screwing around. I also went to the Picasso Museum, and that was one of the things I hadn't really. I'm not that into modern art. I can't say I'm that much of an expert. I'm more into like classical representational art, and the illustrators and the guys that I follow, animation people. So going to learn about Picasso, the same thing, right? You see his early work, and he was just awesome, unbelievable draftsman, just student of art. And then later on, you see the other stuff is just exploding with creativity, even though he did reach, and you probably guys know how famous he really was. Back then, he was a rock star, and he had all this money, and everything that goes with that. But at the same time, he was so productive, just prolific in doing everything: sculpture, painting, ceramics. It was really the variety of that is super inspiring. So one of the things that you can think about when you're working on your own stuff is just look at somebody else and think guys that you admire, figure out how they got there, and see if you can reverse engineer that stuff in your own in your own production, right? It can sometimes get depressing when you see like these rock stars doing, talking about visual storytelling. If you follow any of the guys working at a high level in the big studios like Pixar, Disney, DreamWorks, any of that, it can be intimidating because they've probably been at it for 20 and 30 years, and they've been trained by the best, and they're in there working at a really intense pace, and so that will force you to grow. And this is kind of the things that you need to be looking at, and not so much that like, oh man, these guys are untouchable because they're so huge, amazing, great artists, but figure out what they did day in and day out to get there. And if you do that, and this is why I talk a lot about pencil mileage, I talk a lot about having, carrying a sketchbook with you, right? Something like this. Like this is a really small sketchbook that I can throw in the back of my pocket, and even if I'm waiting in line somewhere, I can take this out and just doodle, just sketch something. And it doesn't have to be anything you're going to show anybody. You don't have to post it anywhere if you don't want to. It's really just getting in the habit of building up your pencil mileage and doing as much as you can to get better at what you're doing, right? So yeah, and again, if you guys have any tips on what works for you, please by all means share it with the rest of the group, and we'll post that stuff on Storyboard Art and on the other platforms, social media. because it's so important. The one thing that I think I talked a little bit last time about email and organizing that stuff. Some people wrote back and saying, "Wow, that was some really good tips, and I'm glad I could help in that way." What I what I'm hoping to do with that, and so that we put everything into perspective, even though we're using these modern tools like task management things and email and cell phones, that we don't let that take over the creativity of what we're doing on our day to day and in our productions, because that's really what you're going to be remembered for. That's what's important. It's not important to fill out your calendar and your email. Those are just tools to help you get to where you want to go. And I think when we lose sight of that, and sometimes they take over, that we want to get so organized and into that, like structure stuff, that you forget that you're trying to do something creative. Okay, those kinds of tools come into play in a bigger environment when you're working with a lot of people in a production studio, where you have to kind of be you have to be in sync with everybody. And especially now with this distributed way that we can work, and that people are on lockdown in their houses and stuff, those tools will come more and more into play. But remember, the bulk of your day should be being productive. Okay. One good recommendation here too, which sometimes I don't get to all the time. I'll be honest, is that you wake up in the morning, the first thing you do should be the most important thing that you want to get done that day, right? And I have in my organization, my calendar, to help remind me that I do my art dojo training, which is what let me remind let me see if I can explain that, because that sounds a little weird. Is just practicing. It's basically daily practice, right? And I have blocks in there, and even if I just do 20 minutes, right? If I can get down a couple sketches and just get my hand-eye coordination moving, turning that stuff on, like, I'll feel much better throughout the day, and the rest of the day will go and flow a little bit more. I start going stir crazy when I don't get that stuff done, and I start thinking, oh man, I haven't done any drawing, I haven't done anything productive. I'm just like, putting out fires. Then that's where it doesn't help me, and I start going crazy. So for my own sanity, what I call it, this art dojo training, where you sit down just like in a kung fu dojo or a karate dojo, that you train. Okay, that you're practicing stuff. And to me, it's not just like scribbling and doodling, because I think your mind can wander if you're doing that. To me, it's a little bit more focused. It's like the Michael Jordan story I was telling you about. Like, those guys were probably doing drills, right? And really focusing on their craft, their technique. The same thing goes for artists, musicians, right? When a musician sits down at the piano, they warm up with scales, right? They're doing technique. They're getting themselves ready to go for whatever creative stuff or studio work they have to do. Same thing goes with artists. You want those creative muscles firing in your head, and then when you actually sit down to do your work, you're going to be that much more focused and warmed up to actually do it. It's a mental discipline that requires repetition, repetition and repetition. You have to do it over and over and over again until you get better at it. And the weird thing about this, I've said this before, is that it's very hard to see the results, or I find it very difficult to see the results as a visual artist, because to me personally, just battling through, have I done it better? Does it look good? Is this right? I have to get up out of my chair, sit back and look at it, right? And sometimes I just can't. It's so scrambled in my mind that I have trouble deciphering whether something is right or not, or what I'm referring to here is if I'm actually improving from one day to the next. The trick with that, though, is to save your work and to do like check-ins every 3 to 6 months, right? And sometimes you want to check in. Well, if you do 3 to 6 months, you do kind of quarterly check-ins, at least every 6 months or so. And then after a year, you look back at your work and you see if anything is, if you see any improvement. And I think that's when you start to realize, I've done this. I look back at old sketchbooks and be like, wow, I can do this now. It flows much better for me now than what I had been doing before. And sometimes I'll look back at sketchbooks and be like, hey, that's not so bad. I actually like what I did there, because I forget what I actually drew. So both of those things come into play. But the idea that you're doing growth and you have this mental discipline that you have to practice each and every day because you're being productive, You just have to do it and trust the process, that by doing it every single day and practicing your skills, you're going to get better at it. You're going to get better at it. And sooner or later, you're actually going to start to realize, and it will dawn on you that yes, you can understand composition. Like the ideas are coming to you easier and faster, and you have a little more confidence. And that confidence starts building up after a while, and then it gets somewhat easier. I mean, I think the challenges increase, so it's never like, yeah, now I'm awesome and anything I do is going to be great. No, it's actually quite the opposite. The challenges increase with your capacity to be able to attack them. So then you start taking on bigger and bigger challenges and start doing more complicated stories, and maybe you're challenging yourself visually when it comes to perspective and depth and camera angles, and that becomes really difficult. So the frustration level might stay the same, but you're actually working on more complicated stuff than you were before. Right before, you might had trouble with proportions and anatomy and just getting the basic perspective down, and after a while you get that down, but then you have to worry about other problems. So regardless, though, there's still growth, and that means you are improving. And the bottom line with all of this, and this is why I really encourage you guys to stick with it, is that it should be fun. If you enjoy the process, it's not gonna be like like hard work. It's actually gonna be enjoyable. You get through it with a positive attitude because it fills you up. This is something that like recharges your batteries, right? Um, Oftentimes, if you work on something that you're not into, or you're doing some other kind of job that's not art related, it doesn't fill you as much. So then you have to go back to the drawing board to come back and recharge your batteries. So I really admire those who can take the bulk of their day just to be creative and create work, and out of that, what basically, if you look at it this way, you're giving a gift to the art world. You should be sharing your work and showing other people, and not to show off. It's not about that. It's actually more about sharing your ability, your ideas with the rest of the community. And in this case, really, you have a lot of reach nowadays with the rest of the world, if you think about it, because your stuff, if you post it on Instagram, can be seen by all of the users on Instagram potentially. Same thing with all of the social media. And after a while, you might begin to get a following, and this is actually something that's going to inspire other people. So you're giving back by sharing your work, right? Look at it that way. With that in mind, the other thing to do is just keep at it and keep on with completing your assignments and completing your work. There is a little bit of fear sometimes that comes into play, that you start something and you're kind of afraid to finish it because you don't want to screw up, or you don't want anybody to like comment on it negatively. And no, the real thing, and this is where deadlines help too, but you get it done, put it out there, and then do something else, right? That's how you're going to get better. It really is. And the other thing, going back to what I talked about with these really amazing artists, have you ever seen an artist and you know where they're at now? So they might be really awesome and badass. Have you ever seen their early work? Have you ever gone in and actually researched and seen what they've done when they just started out? This is a fun thing for me to think about, because I have a lot of really talented art friends that I've come up with over the years, like people I went to school with, maybe guys when we first started in animation or working in the studios, and I'm still friends with them. And to see the amazing growth, like some of these guys are just rock stars, right? And I remember as they come up, as we all came up kind of together, um, that they weren't rock stars at the beginning. And some of these guys, it's really humbling to see to see their early work, because it's pretty crude. Like I mentioned Norman Rockwell, like I have a like compilation of his his body of work essentially, and it's from when he started all the way to when he ended. Right, it's a big giant coffee table book. You see the early work, you're like, this guy needs a little more practice. And we're talking about this juggernaut Rockwell, who's just an icon of American illustration. and just a masterful painter. If you've ever seen an original Rockwell, it's really impressive. It really is, because the color, and not everybody loves Rockwells because the design is amazing and stuff. His paint application and color is just top notch, just really, really, really good. Um, I've and okay, I'm getting off a tangent here, but I wanted to say that there's a growth when it comes to artists, and sometimes you want to go back and research where these guys came from, and you'll see that there's a whole journey that they've gone through to get to where they are. Maybe I'll dig up some of my early work, because I've kept a lot of my stuff from the beginning. And like I said, you look at that, and I look at some of the stuff that I've done recently, and it's like, all right, great, I feel a little bit better because there's actually improvement there, right? I've kept some stuff that I did in high school when I was like 17 and 18, and that's there's some pretty crude and basic stuff in my art career that all right, Kenny. Yeah, Kenny saying, hey, show us your beginning work. All right, that's going to be super embarrassing, but maybe I can do it. But whatever. I mean, if it helps, and it's also going to be humbling. And like I said, I know a lot of people who've done this, and they show like drawings when they were doing GI Joe characters when they were a kid, and it's just like very, very childlike, and actually kind of cool, like the way it looks. But we've all been there, man. We've all been there. Um, so that's cool. I think I even I have to dig this up somewhere. It's in a box, but I have some of my first figure drawings that I've ever done in my life when I was like 18. I took a figure drawing class when I was still in high school, and like when I remember doing it, I was like, yeah, I know how to do this. This is great. I can charcoal. I can do this. And I remember looking back at those one time and be like, whew, man, I had no idea what I was doing. Proportions were terrible. It was like very heavy hand, like clunky line work. And the fact that you can learn this, okay, that's the other lesson here, is like, this is not some magic that all of a sudden you're born with, and like, somebody came down and give you some pixie dust and then you're suddenly a magical artist. No, artists are made with hard work. They're created. They are not born. And I have this discussion with a lot of people, but I'm a true believer in that an artist is certainly a learned skill. And if you become a really talented artist, you might have some kind of talent, initial raw skill, let's say. But in order to mold that into something really, really high level, you need to work at it, and you need to have somebody who can show you how to do that, right? Um, yeah, and that's really, I would challenge anybody to show me somebody who just all of a sudden they were born and they're suddenly amazing artists. I went to just the last thing, we'll either take a couple questions or we can end this one early. But um, I remember going to a convention, and there was if I remember correctly, it was like an 8-year-old or 10-year-old kid who came by our table, and he was drawing comics, and the stuff was awesome, just so inspiring. And this kid had, when he was really young, his dad had encouraged him to look at YouTube videos and just draw how-to stuff and how to draw comics and stuff. And at a really early age, he was a real, like, very accomplished artist. Like, his anatomy was good, his proportions were good, even his color and his design was really strong. And I'm like, wow, this guy's gonna give us a run for our money in just a few years. And I was overjoyed to see that. It was so inspiring to see such a young kid do that. But it's because he started really early, and he just applied himself, and that's why he had the skills that he did when he was like 10 years old. Imagine now that this was a couple years ago, so he might be like 12 or 14 years old now. If he continues with that, he's going to be a real star. But again, it's a mental discipline. You got to work at it, and you grow into it. And he wasn't amazing. Like, he wasn't. I wouldn't consider him a Picasso yet, not yet. But he can become a Rockwell, Picasso, Sargent, any of those things if he continues with that. So that's super inspiring. All right, let me take a question here on Facebook. So Aliana, all right. Hello, I would like to ask, how do you not beat yourself up when you don't work as you should, and what to do when you get stuck? That's a great question. Um, so okay, how to not beat yourself up? That one is really kind of tough. I think artists can can be really hard on ourselves personally. One thing that I recommend is that you surround yourself with other inspirational people and you have like a little community. And certainly if you're like you are now on lockdown and that kind of thing, join us on the online community. We have a really positive community at the Visual Storytellers United and then Storyboard Art. So join us there for sure. But okay, so one thing you can do to improve that is just make sure that you are doing something that is a stepping stone and you're making progress. Okay, so look at this in the long term. That okay, maybe you had a bad day because you didn't get anything done, right? Maybe you got totally distracted, you got nothing done. But can you draw for like 5 minutes before you go to bed, right? Can you just doodle? Can you maybe think about a story that you really liked, right? Jot down a dream that you had in the morning, whatever it is, something really, really small to get you on the right path. And another thing to do about blockages. So when you suddenly an artist block, you can sit down, and I've done this. I've been there. You sit down on the drawing table, and nothing comes out. You're just a blank. You have no motivation. Nothing's going. To me, one great advice that I got was you put your pencil down and you draw. Don't stop. You sit there, even if you're blocking, whatever comes out, you just do it. Force yourself to go through the motions. Because after like 10 minutes, if you start doing your storyboards and your sketches and your sequences, you'll start to get on the flow again. And maybe that first 10 minutes you have to completely throw out. But afterwards, you'll pick it up and it'll be that much better. You'll get back into your groove and you'll break right through that block. The other thing to think about there is production artists have no time to have artist block. The schedules are so tight that you get it done or you get the boot. All right. So that, obviously, it can happen that you get fired or whatever, but most of the time you find a way to get it done. Okay. So that artist block stuff when you're in production, it's like, it doesn't work. You might have to like jog yourself out, go have a coffee and like refresh your mind or something. But after you come back, you actually sit down and you get it done. Okay. Anyway, great question. Okay, let me get to one on Instagram here. Oh man, all the questions come in right at the very end. Hey Kenny, all right. Hey buddy, good to see you. For one, what are you working on now? So me, thanks for asking. I'm actually working on a couple things. So I'm finishing up a short film I started a long time ago, and I really need to wrap this one up. And that's actually picking up some steam. I talked with my musician buddy who's on board to help me finish this up, and I got my filmmaker and cinematography buddy also in the background. We're all going to push this together, and I'm editing that right now. So it's a live action short that I'm working on. The other thing I'm working on is a live action feature that I'm going to be co-directing with another filmmaker, and that is called Alien Country, and that's basically it's a really cool alien story. We're knocking out and doing a script rewrite right now and doing the story beats. So that's something that I'm involved in. It's really exciting. I'm going to show you guys a lot of those kind of in progress stuff as they come along, and we work through those things. So yeah, I keep myself busy, and these are things that I've set up already. So like even this virus slowdown and stuff, I'm still working. I'm still trying to be productive and do these things because I have a setup and I can do that. So I encourage you guys to do that as well. All right, let me get to another question. All right, Amanda, let me read your question here. Thank you for joining. I have questions. What was the first gig you realized you made it? Do you have any daily practices you can suggest for young artists looking for their first storyboard gig? Yes. Okay. Well, let me answer that first question. What was the first gig you realized when you made it? So I was straight out of school. I was overjoyed that I got an intern position as a young animator, 2D animator. But I had various jobs after that. But I think the first gig that I really thought I was like, I was so overjoyed to be working was a 2D animated feature that I worked on in Spain called The Three Wise Men. And this eventually became the Spa Studios, and Sergio Pablos took over that studio, and they eventually made Klaus, which came out recently. I worked with some of those guys back then, and this was early on in my career. I was so happy just doing 2D animation and drawing every day. And I did story work there, and I did some layout as well. So I had my hands in a couple of things, and it was such a great learning experience. Made some really good friends. And that was the one gig I was like, yes, this is my life. This is what I really, really want. And I worked hard on that production. I was really into it. So that was cool. That was the first gig. The other one where I say I made it. I don't think, I've had the luxury of working at some really nice studios, right? And I think you guys know that. Um, and they're working on top-notch things. So I've worked at Pixar, I've worked at Lucasfilm, and you get to these studios and it's like you look around, you're like, man, this place is pretty nice. and and so it's very humbling to see that. But I mean, I worked at Skywalker Ranch. If you guys, not to brag, but I just want to say that place is just unreal. It is a magical place to work. I have some videos. Maybe I should dig those up and I'll send them your way because it's kind of cool to see the process there. And like I said, very humbling to be at those places. Anyway, advice for you to get as a young artist to get your first gig. My recommendation is just do what you can to get your first jobs. If it's freelance, if it's working for, kind of less than the rate that you think you should be working at, but you're building up your skills to get your portfolio in there. And I had this idea that, oh yeah, I really want to work in feature, and all of a sudden I was going to be working at Pixar straight out of school, and then it didn't happen. Like I didn't have the skills, like I wasn't ready. So um, I think what to get your foot in the door, you want to do everything possible to kind of build up your portfolio and hustle your way into doing what you want. And if you set out your goals and you have an end goal of like where you want to be in 5 years, that will help you do that. Okay, cool, great questions. All right, let's keep this going. This is kind of fun. I got some more, and I'll get to these on Facebook. From Kumar, hey buddy, good to see you as well. Uh, when it comes to productivity, I often get into finishing the board or a sketch. Don't know where to stop. That's an interesting interesting problem to have. To me, it's funny. Okay, if I'm doing personal work, uh, yeah, that might continue over and over and over again. If I'm doing production work and I'm on a studio, really the time to stop is when the clock runs out. Like I divide up the time that I have to do a sequence, and I divide that up by the amount of hours I have or the amount of days I have to work, and that's you come up with a number. So it could be like on an average, you have to come up with a storyboard every 2 hours, right? Or you have to do 10 panels in an hour, something like that. Whatever the math works out to, and then that's all you get. So you put as much rendering and shading and cleanup as you can into that particular time, and then that's where that's all you get. So when you're doing personal work, I have like paintings that I haven't finished on my on my easel, like this all around my studio, and those things can go on forever. And I think I always get a little bit upset about that. But if you give yourself a goal too, if you have the end goal in mind before you start, then you'll stop noodling and noodling and noodling. There's a difference between like personal work to me and production work. Personal work can go on forever. You still want to have a goal because you want to be productive and do it. And but you can have maybe a couple pieces that you just keep on going forever. You want to experiment, but the other ones, I recommend setting a goal, knowing what that goal is, and so when you reach it, you finish, you put it away, and you put it out there. Okay. Kumar, you're a badass artist anyway, so I'm sure you have no trouble reaching a level where where things are really nice and it's nice and tight. I think the other factor to keep in mind there is if you're doing client work, what the client wants. So if you establish what they want first, you'll know when it's time to give them and turn in the work. Okay. Great questions. All right, let me get to Emma here. Does the feeling of doubt ever go away? That's a really good question, and I think you're referring to like the feeling of self-doubt and us as artists. And my friend, to me it never goes away. There's always this like insecurity that you're not good enough, that you probably shouldn't be doing this because you're wasting your time and you're never going to be good. You're never going to actually get anywhere. And I'm telling you, if you listen to those voices in your head, it's the wrong thing to do. We all have that. You have to put that away, and you have to figure out a way to mentally compartmentalize that stuff and look at the positive. Get inspired. Pull out the books and the artwork and people that you like, who's on your Instagram feed and stuff, and follow those guys, right? And then get inspired. Say, I want to be like that. They were in my place sometimes. They're probably thinking the same thing. They're not good enough. They can't do it. you have to continue no matter what. And I'm going to tell you, take it from me, you are good enough. You can do it. You can improve. You can learn this. It is possible. This is not some mystery out there. There's a way to do it. There's a method to it. And if you're completely clueless, that's why we have storyboard art. So you can come to us and we're going to guide you. We're going to train you. We'll show you how, right? And we're doing that right now on the visual story course. You can do that for free. We're going to be there and guide you guys. So, if anybody is out there and needs a boost of inspiration, come to us, man. We're here to help because we've all been there, and it's really, really hard when you get into this stuff. But there is a way. You got to be productive, get disciplined, do it, and do it, and do it. All right. All right. Let me take a couple more, and then we gotta bounce for today. Okay. All right, Jen Joy, thanks for your comment there. That's awesome. She said, "I love your book. I read it more than 5 times." Wow, you're awesome. Thank you for that. Yeah, I appreciate those comments. And it was fun writing that book. Is that was also a challenge, and I can't take all the credit because super badass artist Anson Ju was my co-publisher, and he was the one who kind of brought me onto that project anyway. So yeah, that guy's amazing. Um, all right. All right, guys. Yeah, see you, Kenny. I see your note there. And let me take one on Facebook here. Um, and then we'll bounce out this. So Alyana also asks here, do you have any storyboard exercises that you recommend doing? Well, I just mentioned that there's a story course. We got 5 assignments on there. And if you want, take staging exercises. We're talking inventing sequences with characters and doing visual sequential art. Single panel storytelling images. I always recommend people doing that. That's also one of the assignments because that's really challenging. It's really hard to come up with one panel, one drawing that tells a story, right? And it's come an interesting angle. It's got really good composition, and that anybody looking at it knows exactly what's going on. And sometimes those take multiple iterations till you get it right. So those are some of the things that I think you should be working on. All right, fellas. Well, thank you for your time here. Thanks for joining me. We're gonna see if we can do more of this week. So we'll see you soon. And in the meantime, keep working hard, stay productive, think about what you're gonna do tomorrow, and get to it. And then share your work, post us a link, and let us know what you did. Hopefully this stuff can be helpful. All right, guys, let's lean on each other to improve. All right, take care. We'll see you soon.